Welcome back, everyone. This is our final episode in this series, and it feels really important to slow down for a moment and acknowledge what we've been moving through together. Over the last several conversations, we've explored what it looks like when women begin to understand their bodies in new ways, especially through the lens of neurodivergence, hormonal shifts, and late life diagnosis. Last week, we talked specifically about the overlap between autism and epilepsy and how often girls and women move through life misunderstood, misdiagnosed, or not diagnosed until much later. We talked about how neurodivergence doesn't always present in the way medicine historically expected it to. And because of that, many women become incredibly skilled at adapting, masking, compensating, pushing through, learning how to function inside systems that don't always recognize what's happening beneath the surface. And that conversation naturally leads us here. Because when you zoom out, this isn't just about neurodivergence, it's also about healthcare, about what happens when a woman knows something is changing in her body, but the system around her doesn't fully reflect or validate what she's experiencing. So in this final episode, we're talking about that intersection directly, not just what's happening, but what it feels like to live it and what it means to move forward from it. And I'm really grateful that Heather, of course, is here with me again to share this conversation with me. Heather brings deep insight into the neurodivergence and perimenopause intersection, and and root causes, patterns, and individualized care. Because the final conversation is not about finding a single answer. It's about finally telling the truth of what so many women have quietly experienced. Before we talk about solutions or support, I think we need to start with something very honest. Many women listening to this will recognize the feeling of being dismissed in healthcare settings or leaving appointments with more confusion than clarity, of questioning themselves after they've already tried to advocate for what they're feeling. And I want to be really clear here. This isn't about intention. This isn't always about intention, but the impact is real. Symptoms minimized, concerns redirected, or being told everything is normal when your lived experience says otherwise. Heather, is there something that you see as isolated experiences, or is this something more systemic for women, especially neurodivergent women?
Well, I mean, it's historically accurate to say that women are so understudied in anything in the medical field, at least from what I've come across, and especially in neurodivergence and menopause. From what I understand, even up until this day, there have been zero randomized controlled studies or trials that specifically examine ADHD and menopause together. And I mean, I don't want to say that it's not because we didn't have the resources or because the doctors didn't care, because that's not necessarily true. But there was a study that was done this year, and it was a conference presentation actually in London. And they were talking about how they pulled data from testing 400 ADHD women, and 73.8% of those women testified basically that their symptoms were dismissed or misattributed. And over half of those women were actually diagnosed with other conditions first. And so this is, this was this year. So this is still a very current reality. This is something that's still happening, even though, last week we were talking about those resources and tools and support groups and things like that, even though that is becoming more widely acceptable and accessible, the medical field still hasn't really seemed to catch up to that and recognize the fact that our bodies are changing and things are happening, and it really needs to be looked at, because I mean, I'm just look at all the stuff that we've been talking about, like it's clearly a thing, right? So
Right.
the fact that there hasn't been any studies done at all, I mean, not every woman is going to be neurodivergent, but every woman goes through menopause. So why is this such an understudied thing? I mean, I don't understand.
That's the big question is why? Why is this not looked at? Why is this intersection? Because it is so profound's not the right word. It's very relevant with most neurodivergent women, you know what I mean? I mean, even just women in general, they might, the non-neurodivergent women aren't probably gonna, is it safe to say that they might not struggle as much? Maybe, but they're still gonna struggle, you know, those masks are still gonna fall. You're still gonna think like you're going crazy when really it's your body, you know, just shifting hormones and everything that's going on inside is that baseline shifting. So, but the neurodivergent women, I mean, that's a whole new level. And that question of why is nobody looking into this? Because they know, I mean, even women doctors, you know, like why are they not looking at it? Because they're experiencing it themselves, you know? So that is a really great question that I think all of us probably ask is why is this not looked at? And I'm really curious as to know the answer.
And it begs the question, like, when you know something and you learn something and you become an expert at something, there's a, I forget what the term is called right now, but there's a thing that happens where you just assume that everyone else knows it too. You know what I mean? So these female doctors, they're learning about it in medical school, from what I understand, and they're like, oh, well, every woman goes through this. Every woman probably knows about this already. It's like, okay, well, but did you know about it before you went to medical school or after? Because I shared last week, like, I have no idea. I had my mom, all my mom told me was about hot flashes and,
Sure.
disrupted sleep. And I'm like, okay, well, but there's so much more going on. And
But
I wouldn't even say that neurotypical women don't suffer as much or struggle as much. It's just that they're struggling 100%. They're
mhm.
going through all the things. The neurodivergence just adds like a magnification of that. Like we're
Yeah.
going through like an extreme version of it because our brains are already imbalanced in those hormones and things like that, estrogen, all the things we have already talked about. So it just like emphasizes it, it exacerbates it. So it's like all the women are still going through it. So why has it not been looked at? Why has there not been studies done at all? And why are we not prepared about it? Like even in sex education class in school, health class in school, like it's part of the woman's cycle, a life cycle. Like why is it not talked about?
Well, and that's another good point. I mean, I feel like yeah, these people learn about it in med school, but and to be fair, like they don't really know in depth about any of it because they haven't lived it personally. And that's the same with like you and I. We may have heard about it. We have maybe watched our moms go through it. And maybe even our grandmas, if we were really early and knew what we were looking about, we probably didn't. So really, our moms. But that doesn't mean that we really understood it on a level that you know when you experience something you learn you really learn a whole new you know it's on a whole new level, you know what I mean? So like if these women or people that are in the medical field they don't haven't lived through it, I suppose it's kind of hard to really kind of understand it unless you start maybe like with an older female doctor and kind of move and let that research kind of trickle down if that makes sense and start doing like case studies, you know, like start testing women and seeing how this intersection really kind of ties together so that there can be more awareness around it. I think it's a really good point. And I wonder if it makes me want to like go on this powwow of let's start doing this. Like like let's start getting more research about this because there are so many women that want answers and they're tired of being gaslit and you know not validated in their experience when they go to the doctor. It's and they wonder why people don't want to go to the doctor and be preventative about their health and wellness is because they're always dismissed. They're always, you know, saying, "Oh, the labs are normal," or "Oh, you're fine," or "It's in your head," or "You just have maybe a little bit of anxiety about this and you're kind of spiraling in your head," you know. All these things don't make you want to go back to the doctor. So
Not at all.
I think it's really important to address so that women know that they're not alone and that this is a very real problem that is been going on for quite some time. It's a long time, and I feel like it's only getting worse. There is a level of awareness happening, but it's still, I think,
Not
I mean,
top
it's a
priority.
whole, yeah, it's a whole nother conversation, but I think, you follow the money and that's where it's gonna, lead. So, but I just, think that women need to know that they're not being dramatic. They're not being, they're not failing. They're not, any one of those things. So I think that's really important to kind of, realize, state, whatever. Um, honestly, this feels like, really personal for me because I've lived parts of this too, and I'm sure you have as well. Um, after my son was born, Henry, I started noticing small changes in my body, and like nothing extreme per se, but just enough that I knew that something was shifting. And I brought it up to my OB, and she decided that she was going to do yearly blood work and to make sure that like thyroid and everything else is okay. Um, but the message underneath that stayed pretty consistent. It was like, you're just too young for perimenopause. You're just too young for this phase of life. And I remember sitting with that because I wasn't coming in with certainty. I was coming in with curiosity. I was asking questions. I was sharing that the women in my family tend to enter this phase earlier in life. But that didn't really change the direction of the conversation. She just kept telling me that I was too young. I was too young, and you're thinking too much into this. And I think this is important because medical dismissal doesn't always sound dismissive. Sometimes it sounds reassuring and like you're fine. Everything looks normal. You're too young. But over time, even the gentle dismissal can start to shift how you trust your own body. So I'm curious, do you see that pattern in women that you work with, or is there this like one big moment of being dismissed, or is it more of like a slow erosion of self-trust over time?
I think it's a combination of all of that. I mean, you have those gentle dismissals that are like, oh, yeah, you're fine. Like, okay, but that's literally saying the exact same thing as it's all in your head. Okay.
Yeah,
Women are
just in a
very,
nice professional way.
right, right. Let's talk about bedside manner for a minute. Okay. When to use it and when not to use it, right? And I'm even joking here. We should always use it, but you get my point. Like, so, it's a combination of all of those things because it starts with that gentle dismissal, right? Like, oh no, you're fine, you're too young. But then as those symptoms continue and you keep going back, potentially keep going back and be like, it's, getting worse. Like I tried to ignore it. I tried to say everything was fine, but it's still happening and now it's getting worse. And then so now they're like, all right, let's run some tests. And as we know from what Dr. Scott has already said, a lot of those tests aren't even testing the right things. So
Right.
yeah, now it looks like everything is fine, so they can reassure you again. But women are so in tune with their bodies. We are so connected with what's going on. We pay attention. We're our center of gravity, our center of, power is in within our body, in our belly. And so like when you're telling me that, and take this all with a grain of salt here because I'm the type of person where I don't like being told what to do. I don't like
Same.
don't like that. So when you're telling me that I'm wrong, basically, that I don't know my own body, and that what I'm imagining, what I'm going through, I'm either imagining or maybe it's something else. Well, okay, well, what else could it be then? Let's get to the bottom of it then.
Mhm.
But then this brings us into that other part where it's like now we're getting into either surface level things or I'm going to share some stories here in a bit about things that I've been through about being misdiagnosed. And so it's this whole process of all of this accumulating over time. And then of course if you're told that you're imagining something for so long, you can only be told that for so many times before you start to believe it. So it's like, all right, do I to fight the good fight and go get a second or third or fourth opinion? But if you look at the statistics, that's probably just going to be a waste of time and energy because none of the doctors really seem to know what they're doing in this area. So like, what do you do at that point? What do you do?
Well, that's the question because some women don't know the next step. Like if your doctor keeps telling you the same thing over and over again, then you're like, you toss your hands up and like, okay, well, now what do I do? Who do I go see? What specialist do I need to? Because most specialists need referrals. And if your doctor thinks that everything's fine, they're not going to give you a referral, or most likely not unless you like kick and scream and say, no, I know what your tests say, but I think something's going on and I'd really like to, I've done that once, you know? And I did get the referral, but a lot of times you don't. So if you can't see the specialist, then where is it that you go? And that's what a lot of women are probably facing, that they're tossing their hands up like, okay, well, they don't believe me. Am I really going crazy? Because, or is there someone out there that can basically validate that I'm know what's going on inside of my own body? I just can't pinpoint what it really is. You know, I don't have the diagnostic tools to do that. So that's the real thing. I remember vividly going through that same exact question process in my head. Like, okay, now what? If they don't believe me, then who will? I mean, and it's a long list. And when you're not familiar with the kinds of doctors and specialists that are out there that will help you kind of figure out what to, and weed through those symptoms. Like, I don't even know what those symptoms would really, like, what it would kind of, unless you Google, but that's not always a reliable source, you know, like, you know, I could have gone like to a rheumatoid rheumatoid. I don't even know what kind of, see, I still don't even know, like rheumatoid, maybe, I don't even remember, kind of specialist, like about, or somebody that specializes in autoimmune stuff, because it could have been like lupus, it could have been, you know, this, that, or the other thing. So it's like, I know if I went through that, and I'm sure you went through that, there are many women that are going through that same exact question process. And that's frustrating. And that alone is a lot to carry. But again, even though we are so in tune with our body, that process alone quietly dims that intuition around our own health and safety inside of our body. And that's what is hard to come back from. You know, it is doable, don't get me wrong, but it's a long process to come back from that, because they have slowly eroded away our own self-trust. And that's, in my opinion, that's crap. You know, I think it's not right. It's not right at all. And I think that there are just a lot of things that we need to change in our healthcare system. But, you know, I think all the systems need to burn to the ground, and we just that's another conversation.
Conversation for another day.
Yes.
I'm trying not to go down that rant hill today. But
Yes. So, I know after COVID, I know a lot of people were probably in that, in that same boat, because, you know, now we're adding a layer of things that, you know, a lot of people being sick, and then there you have long COVID symptoms and all that. So people really didn't really know what it was that they were experiencing. And again, even just COVID alone, there was a lot of dismissal. There was a lot of, you know, oh, you're fine. Oh, you know, you'll be fine. Just get the jab and you'll be a-okay, right? And I remember going to the doctor, and after COVID, I started writing down a lot of these symptoms that were new to me. I mean, the symptoms are out there, people experience them, but they were new to me. And it was a list. I'm talking, it was a list. And I brought it to the doctor and I read everything off, and they're like, well, we can only like address a few of these at a time, was the first thing that they said to me. And after that, it was the anxiety entered the conversation very quickly, and they wanted to put me on anxiety medication. I'm like, listen,
how dare you make a list? How dare you keep track?
Yeah, how dare you question your,
and
how
now
dare
it
you
makes
question
look
our
like
authority?
You're paranoid because you're making this list. Like, if you were really that in tune with your body, like, wouldn't you just know off the top of your head? And why is it so detailed? And why is now they're like, oh, now you're paranoid. Now you're making it all up. Now you have that anxiety thing that comes in, and it's like, no, I want to be accurate because you're not helping me.
Absolutely.
Maybe this will help you help me.
And I just remember that they're wanting to, and I don't struggle with anxiety. I mean, yes, anxiety pops up from time to time, but I'm able to kind of pop out of it real quick once I'm in real time and being able to catch the pattern, you know? And so when that entered the conversation, and while, don't get me wrong, medication is absolutely helpful in some cases, but this is not about that. It's about dismissing what was going on with me bringing in this list, right? I'm wondering like, and now after being dismissed, then you leave with more answers or more questions than answers, and you're like, okay, is anxiety part of the root cause? Did COVID create some anxiety in me? Because in while we were in lockdown, there was a stint that I had to go to the ER because my whole left side of my body went numb for 2 weeks. And so I know that, and again, I don't struggle with anxiety, so I had no idea what was going on. Am I having a stroke? Whatever. Nope, no stroke. No, they told me it was anxiety. I'm like, anxiety about what? And they're like, sweetheart, we're in the middle of a pandemic. And I'm like, oh yeah. So okay. I was like, I guess maybe I'm just not. I don't notice stress responses in my body as until they're like super loud, like until they're like, and so I guess maybe that was just one. So when I was walking out of the doctor in this situation, I'm like, well, maybe is anxiety part of the root cause? Or, was anxiety becoming the explanation because we didn't yet have a full understanding of what else might be happening in my body, right? Because my blood work looked normal, all of the things, but I didn't feel normal. Let me tell you, I'm, losing hair and, I'm constantly fatigued. I mean, like the list, I could go on, but it was just I did not feel normal. Something was off. Something was not right. And eventually I realized, well, this isn't long COVID at all. This is perimenopause. When I started putting the pieces together, I was like, oh shit. that, I'm like, is it really? Am I really that at that age? Oh man. But that realization not only was it was both grounding and frustrating because I'm like, damn, this sucks. It made me wonder how many women are living inside that same disconnect, though, where something real is happening in the body, but it gets filtered into a familiar label before the full picture is ever even seen? So is that something that you see often too, or is it
Yeah.
just
No, no, absolutely. I mean, I've never gone in to the doctor with a full list, but like, I mean, just for example, I'm just going to share some of my stories here. Like, for
mm-hmm.
example, when I was in high school, I was acting out, for lack of a better term. I was cutting, I was self-medicating, like there was something wrong. I didn't know what it was. I didn't have the language for it. I was a teenager. I had no idea, but something was wrong. And so my dad took me to the doctor. He saw one of the cuts on my arms or something. And he took me to the doctor and they were like, "Oh, she's just depressed. Like it's fine. She's just depressed. Let's put her on this
Oh
medication."
yeah, it's just fine.
But if they would have looked at my medical record, like if you look at, I have it pulled up here, if you look at the DSM-5 diagnostic symptoms of depression, and this is the one thing that I disagree with the DSM-5, especially from personal experience as well as just what I know about it, it's 2 weeks, at least a 2 week period of symptoms for five or more of the following symptoms that they have listed. But if you look at this list, fatigue, loss of energy, worthlessness, concentration skills, loss of interest, depressed mood, weight changes, like a lot of those could be attributed to hormones with a teenager, and a lot of that can
Yeah.
be attributed to other things. And so, if they would have looked at my medical record, they would have seen that my depressive symptoms were only during the winter time because I have a vitamin D deficiency. Okay. And so I get seasonal depressive disorder when the sun's not out. That has nothing to do with having a depressive disorder. In the summer, I'm fine. I don't have any 2 week periods, but because it lasts longer than 2 weeks in the winter, and if I would say go to the doctor in the winter, now it looks like something completely different because they didn't dig in, they didn't ask the right questions, they didn't look at my full record, and they weren't asking me like, okay, well, why did you cut yourself? If you would have asked me so I could feel something, well, that's not depression. That's something completely different. Okay. So I was an empath and I was feeling all of the emotions and all of the energies around me, and I didn't know. So everything was just chaos all the time, emotionally, energetically, mentally. And so it was like, it wasn't numb, but it just felt like constant chaos. So to feel something, I was cutting myself anyway. But so they gave me a whole bunch of medications. Long story short, They gave me all these medications that I didn't need, which turned me into a zombie, which made me like go through all these things that were unnecessary because I was misdiagnosed. And in fourth grade, I was a straight A student for the most part, but I failed a test. And so my mom made me bring my history book home. I don't know if I shared this story before or not, but she read me a paragraph and she's like, okay, what did I just read to you? And I was like, I have no idea. And that's when I found out I had ADHD, but I was never diagnosed because back then, like, they didn't know what that was, right? This was before Ritalin. This was before the whole big like boom of ADHD that happened, ADD in children. So they're like, oh, she just has an attention problem. Oh, she's just, defiant, rebellious, whatever. And it's like, no, there's something else wrong. And so then when I was an adult, I went back to the doctor, and this was the VA, which the rest of my stories are about the VA, and I'm not picking on them intentionally, but I went there. I had this rash on my hand. Could not figure out what it was. It was this like my skin was burning away. It was this really bad, painful rash on my just one hand. And so I went to the doctor, and the guy, he was a younger guy, and he didn't even look at me, didn't look at my hand, didn't even look me in the face. He's sitting at a desk like this behind, like I'm sitting at the chair. And he's like, I told him what was going on. And he's like, did it start between your fingers? And I was like, yeah. He's like, you have scabies. And I was like, no, I don't have. I had to look it up. I was like,
What?
what is scabies? And I looked and I was like, no. I was like, first of all, if scabies is highly contagious. I've had this for months, and no one else in my life, my boyfriend, my family, the people I live with, no one in my life has this same thing. And he was like, I'm sorry, I can't help you. And I was like, what? So you're just going to let my skin rot away because I disagreed with you? Okay. Turns out I was having an allergic reaction to something, but I had to figure that out myself as my skin is rotting away because
Oh my God.
the doctor told me it was something. He didn't even look at my hand. He didn't even look at me in the face. I don't, and again, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole of, is it because I'm a woman? There's always that. Just throwing that out there. Is it because I am not a doctor? Is it because, I don't know what it was, but he didn't even look at me. Was it because it was late at night when I went into the emergency room, which is an emergency room? Like, that's what it's there
Right.
for? I don't know. I don't know. But he completely dismissed me, and then he wouldn't even help me at all because I questioned him. I'm guessing because I questioned him because I don't know, whatever. So then later, I went to the VA because I finally had to fight 13 years after I got released from the military just for the VA to give me medical insurance, to give me help, which you're supposed to get day one. I fought, I had to get an advocate, all these things. I had to fight for 13 years just to get health insurance. Don't get me started on that either. But so I finally went, and in this whole process, I've already been diagnosed with ADHD by a family care physician. I've been on Adderall and Wellbutrin for quite some time. It worked. That combination worked for me. The Wellbutrin helped me get out of bed in the morning because I'm an out of sight, out of mind. Like when I am not happy, I don't want to look at anything. I don't want to experience reality, so I don't want to get out of bed. And then the Adderall helped me keep my focus all day because that's the other part of it for me. So I've been on this routine for years now, paying for it out of pocket, but on it for years. I go to the VA because now I finally have health insurance, so I can get all this for free. And I go see my first mental health doctor. And I'm sitting there. And again, he wouldn't even really look at me in the face. And he was asking me questions after I filled out the form and told him my uh, history and everything. And he was like, are you sure you're not bipolar? And I was like, and granted, also keep in mind, by this point, I've already graduated from, I already have a master's degree in psychology. So now you're going to try to psychology the psychologist. Okay. I didn't tell him that, but I'm like, all right, let's see where this goes. Are you sure you're not bipolar? And I was like, yes, I'm 100% certain I'm not bipolar. I was like, even my boyfriend, who I had at the time, jokes about how laid back I am and how things don't get a rise out of me. And I don't have manic episodes. I don't have, all of the things that go along with that, you know, disorder. And he's like, are you sure? I was like, how many times are you going to ask me this? Yes, I'm sure. I'm not going to change my answer and second guess myself because you asked me 6 times. Am I sure? Are you sure you're not bipolar? Yes, I'm sure. Look at my history. I've been diagnosed by another accredited physician with ADHD. Why are you asking me if I'm bipolar? Are you saying that that doctor's wrong? Are you trying to gaslight me because you want to give me a different kind of medication, which I don't want to go down that rabbit hole either. Like, I was like, can you just give me the medication that I came here for that I've been taking for like 15 years that you're not supposed to just stop taking in the first place, let alone stop taking and then start taking something else? Like, that's not how the system works. Like, at the body system, you can't just do that. And so I left and I told my the people who do the scheduling, I was like, please, I was like, do not schedule me with that person again. I want to see someone else because that was the most ridiculous conversation I've ever been a part of in my entire life. He was trying to gaslight me into thinking that I'm bipolar when I'm 150% sure that that is not my problem, not only because of my psychology education, but also from my lived experience. Like, this is my life, my body. I can tell you that that's not. And so like this whole thing, this is why I wanted to talk about this, because it's such a common thing through my entire life. And we're not even into the perimenopause stuff.
Right.
So this is just things that have happened in my life that the answers were already there. Why are you trying to misdiagnose me? Why are you trying to gaslight me? Why are you not even looking at me in the face when you talk to me, let alone hear what I have to say about my body and about these? I don't know if anyone knows what scabies are, but they're little tiny bugs. That's not what it was. But
Right.
when he told me that, and I looked it up, and first thing that pops up is like a microscopic picture of these things, and I was like, ooh. I was like, no, this is not it. But at the same time, like, if they had looked at my medical history, if they had looked at my chart, if they had asked me the right questions, we could have gotten to the bottom of this.
Sure.
You know what I
I
mean?
think that's really important though, because how many women out there that are not certain, that don't know the right questions, that are easily manipulated into thinking differently, or if asked repeatedly, will change their mind
And it's not that they're
because
easily manipulated. It's just that they don't have the language or the education to know how to fight
sure,
back. You know what I mean? To stand up
yeah,
for
they don't
themselves.
know how to advocate for themselves, but there are women out there that don't, how do I word this? That don't feel, they don't form their own beliefs. They take on everyone else's beliefs. So
I'm
if
trying to
somebody
give
can,
people the benefit of the doubt here.
I understand. I just know that they're out there.
I know.
But so when you have women like that are out there, that doctor quite possibly could have convinced that woman that she did have bipolar disorder. You know what I'm saying? So on the flip side, yes, you and I are strong enough to advocate for ourselves, knowing that we trust our bodies and what's going on. We just can't identify it, right? And that's why we're here, for you to help. And you're not, but there's probably a lot of women out there that can't do those things. And so I think that's what, and I'm not saying that all doctors do this maliciously. Not all of them do. Some of them do, but not all of them. So, but I feel like there are women that go to the doctor seeking help, and then like in your experience, they are like, listen, something's not right, whether it be about the hand or whatever's going on. And if a doctor did that to them, they wouldn't have been able to hold strong. They wouldn't have been able to, they probably would have gone with a misdiagnosis. They would have gone with bipolar disorder or whatever. And that's the problem that we're seeing here, is that people are getting misdiagnosed, or even worse, undiagnosed, going undiagnosed, and probably because they're scared to go back to the doctor because of fear of being gaslit, or
And that's
manipulated or whatever.
and that's part of my point. Like, on one, like, I want people to, the reason I share these stories is not just to emphasize, what we're talking about, but also like not to have understanding and compassion for yourself, and to know that even someone who has the medical history right in front of them, even someone who has the language, who does stand up for themselves, they're still gaslighting and fighting back. So even if you
Yep.
don't have those things, like don't feel bad that you're not in that position to have that language or education because they're doing it to us too. So don't feel
Yeah.
bad about that. But then also on the other hand, why is this even why is this happening? Like why is it happening to all of us? And I had another point here and I lost it. I'm having a moment here. But but I
Right?
wanted to specifically talk about like, you know, have understanding and compassion for the situation because you even me, for example, it still happens to me as well. And so it's something that needs to be addressed. It's something that we as a group of women, as a collective, we need to start, making changes and speaking up for ourselves and being like, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. Like, I know my body. Help me and do some research. And that's why Dr. Scott has been such a valuable asset to this because, even the stuff that he was talking about with like the gut brain stuff, like, okay, well, he gave me stuff that I didn't know that now I'm gonna
Yep.
go to my doctor and be like, hey, I need this test. We did the blood test or whatever. Like now we got to do something different because all my stuff looks normal, but I know there's something wrong. Let's do this other test. Because if you go in there and you know the language for it and you ask for it specifically, they might be a little bit surprised. But if you even kind of fake it and act like you know what you're talking about a little bit, like they'll be like, okay, like even if it's just to put my mind at ease, let's just run this test, whatever. If you have access to that, obviously. But yeah, it's just such a thing and makes me so angry.
I know. I know. I feel you. I think that this is where the conversation like shifts a little bit though, because while naming the problem is really important, but also understanding what support really looks like from here is equally as important. One
100.
thing that I've learned personally is that expecting one provider to hold the entire picture usually doesn't work. Like I was talking about earlier, you may have to go to several doctors and see different specialists or this or that to get a full clear picture of what's going on. And while that is frustrating, it can be extremely clarifying. You know what I mean? If you put in the work, if you put in the effort, you can get to the bottom of it. You just have to know, like you said, you have to ask the right questions. You have to get to a deeper root cause, and that may look like going to several different doctors and hoping that you're not going to experience what you did with said doctor that gaslight, and hope like I said, hopefully these doctors don't gaslight you. Most specialists, I feel, I shouldn't say most, a lot of specialists, I don't feel like I've been really gaslit by specialists, because there might be some quiet dismissal but not really gaslighting, because you're coming to them for a specific reason and they really know their specialty is in something. So it's not like a broader, view of something. It's a very narrow lane that they kind of drive on. So
But
um
also, you need, like you said, you need a referral to go to a lot of those. So
yep,
obviously, like if you've gotten that referral and you're there to see them, that first whole guessing part of if there is even anything wrong with you gets taken out of the equation. So obviously,
right,
they're going into that appointment assuming that something is wrong with you and that you're there for a reason. So that kind of
correct,
takes that
correct,
out, right?
correct. Yeah, and I think that's also a thing. Now, and like I said earlier, if you're gonna battle with your provider about even getting a referral, that's one thing that I will support you on. Like, and I'm sure you would too. It's like advocate for yourself. Don't back down until they say yes, like with that they will give you that referral, because they don't. They will. They at some point they have to give you that referral. I mean, it's like it would be kind of like a medical neglect. I don't know if that's the
Yeah.
term that's used. Like you're seeking answers, and if you can't give them to me, I need to look elsewhere. So if you deny me that right, then basically you'd be able to, I can't say this for sure, so please don't take this for heed, but you could sue them over that, like because of for malpractice or medical neglect or whatever it is. You know, I'm not versed in the medical stuff, but I'm sure that it's a thing,
Yeah.
right?
And I'm 100% for being a problem. Like I'm just gonna throw that out there. Like when you go to your family doctor, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, well, my insurance only takes this doctor. I have this. Okay, well, you're 9 times out of 10, your family care doctor's office has more than one doctor. Go to the
Yep.
receptionist and be like, I want to see a different doctor. I want a second opinion. Cause a problem and be like, okay, if they're not going to help me, I want to see a third one, and keep asking until they finally are like, fine, go see the specialist. Whatever. Be a
But you
problem.
you realize too, and I think you and I can both agree on this, that while we may be able to do this now, there was probably a point in our life where we weren't real, that wasn't our strong suit. Because as neurodivergent women,
I've always
like,
been a problem.
okay, I will speak for myself then. I can do it now, but I couldn't do it before.
Yeah.
Back when I was younger, I had a very hard time advocating for myself. I had a very hard time speaking up, and people, I was easily shut down. It was, somebody could back me down from my stance very easily. So in that kind of, I think also it's fair to say that there are women out there that don't feel really safe or comfortable, making that scene to advocate for themselves because, for whatever reason, whatever fear that is running through their head, whether they get kicked out of that practice or whatever, then they don't have a doctor. I don't know, like all the different things could apply. But and I just want to preface that, and I know you know that. But we are here now and we can do that. And I will say for myself, I will support anybody in that position. Like if you need help advocating for yourself, give me a freaking call because I will help you
Take
do
a,
that.
take a friend with you to your appointment. Like
Right.
a body double or an accountability person who just like if you start backing down, like let them like nudge you in the back and be like, tell them like keep going, it's okay, keep going. Like
Yeah.
somebody to cheer you on and to help advocate for yourself, whatever you need. Because I mean, if you're not going to do it for yourself, nobody else is going to do it. Let's be real.
Well, and that's what I think we were kind of getting towards here is what does actually supportive care look like? Whether that be by the medical professionals or from friends and family. Like, what is it? Because it's a layered thing. So what does actual supportive care look like? And I'm sure you can talk a whole lot about
Well, I mean, you said something early that really struck a chord and is completely 100% accurate is no one single doctor can help you with all the things. Like that's something that's been brought up through this whole series. And so there are providers that are informed about menopause. There are providers and therapists who are informed about neurodivergence. And there are, you know, practitioners and doctors who are specialized in the body, right? Outside of just the PCP that you go to, whatever. There's different specialists, like we said, and there's different doctors, even primary care doctors. Like my primary care doctor is also an OBGYN. So like
it.
some of them have multiple, specialties or areas of expertise. So really asking around and doing your research and trying to find the right doctor is important, and group of doctors, is very important. But also something that we talked about last week too about these support groups and social media and finding people who neighbors and friends, whatever, that community of people that are also going through these things. That's a great resource, a very underutilized resource, I think, because many, like just like with anything, like we're all on different steps of that journey. So asking those questions and talking to them and letting them share their experience and be like, this is the language that they used with me, try asking your doctor about it in this way or using these words or whatever. And then just, knowing, being self-aware and knowing what's going on in your body and putting all of those things together to figure out a plan of action and a way to advocate for yourself, because you want to know what you're talking about, not in a professional or an expert kind of way, but being able to answer the right questions and explain things in a way that hopefully those doctors will be able to ask you the right questions to get to that
Mhm.
root problem, and be like, okay, well, I have this, I heard about this, I have this, and I have this, could this be a possibility, or whatever the case may be, right? So just just having that shared knowledge with those communities and with knowing what's going on with your body and creating that group of doctors that are really going to help steer you in that right direction.
It really is about finding the right doctor. I mean, I can speak from personal experience because it's not just doctors with me. It was like even through school, like how I learned best really boiled down to the right teacher.
Oh,
Like
100%. Same.
whether that be their teaching style, their support style, whatever the case may be. I could use an example. I took a class two different times and I failed miserably the first one, and because of the teaching, I couldn't. I can name it now because I can look back, but it was because of the teaching style. Like this person wrote everything that he was saying on the board and this and that, so that you could take notes, and have everything verbatim, right? And I failed miserably, but then I took it again, and I almost aced the class because of a completely different teaching style. It was something that he made me understand in like very few words, and there was quite a few times we worked in group settings. I mean, it for me personally, it boils down to the right person. So it is absolutely essential that you find the right doctor. If you don't feel comfortable, if you don't feel like they're answering your questions correctly, or that they're dismissing you or gaslighting or whatever, move to the next one. Find a different one. And I know that it can be difficult, especially in today's world when insurance plays a major role in this, but they're out there. They really are out there. And you can, even if you have to spend a little extra sometimes,
Is
it'll
what,
be worth it.
right?
It will be worth it. And then again, not even in the medical standing, but if you have hard time advocating for yourself, bring a friend, bring a family member, call one of us. I don't care. Let
I'll be a
somebody
problem with you.
know
Let's
so
do
that
it.
they can be on part of your support team, because that is important, until you build that muscle and strengthen it, then to where you can do it on yourself, you will need that thing. I used to take people with me to very important doctor appointments with me because I couldn't do that. Now, no, I'll see you in 20. you
I
know.
was always the one that everybody else brought because that's
Right.
been a problem. But no, you're absolutely right. Like, same thing for me, college algebra. I took it in high school because I was advanced, right? I was getting ready to go to college, and I luckily brought my grade up to a C before I graduated. But I used to ask questions because I did want to learn it, and she would never answer my questions directly, and so I would sleep in class because I'm like, what? Why bother paying attention? Because I have no idea what the heck you're saying. And then I took the exact same class my first year of college, and she explained it to me that it was just like this light bulb, like, oh, it all makes sense. And I aced the class. And math is not my strong
Right. Same.
at all. So the fact that I aced it says something about her as a teacher, like she was amazing. But if you look at, finding a therapist, right? We go through different therapists until we find the right one that we click with. Why should your medical doctors not be the same thing? I feel like
Absolutely.
you need someone who's going to listen to you, who's going to pay attention to what you're saying about your body, who's going to actually pay attention to what's going on in your body and do
Right.
the right tests and ask the right questions. So why should that be any different? Why do we have to be, dictated to who our doctor is? Like
Right.
I said, most of those places have more than one. Be like, okay, well, yeah, I can get in on this day to see this doctor, but well, what if I wait a little bit? Can I see a different doctor? Or whatever the case may be. Like, why I don't see why your medical doctor should be any different than your therapist finding it,
Right.
you know?
I agree. I absolutely agree. And it's like they make it incredibly difficult. And my question has always been too, like, if you went into this profession because you cared about helping people and serving people and helping them get to a healthier state, and to get to that preventative, way of life, that wouldn't you think that you would never be in that position of gaslighting and
Oh,
and
don't get me started
you
on
know
that.
what I'm saying? Like if that's
100%
what
I
you're
do.
doing, then why are you in this profession?
You don't want me to answer that question. We'll continue.
I mean, I've got my own thoughts, but it was more rhetorical. But you know
Yes.
what I'm saying? I have the same thing about a lot of professions. So,
Yeah.
but I guess it's just one of those things that it just really comes down to support, advocacy, for self and others. It's just, it's a frustrating process to go through. I think what this kind of brings us to, if we zoom out across the whole series, it kind of brings us to the real question. Because I think a lot of women, this isn't just about symptoms. It's become more about identity and trust, and how long they've been learning to override themselves just to function in systems that didn't fully see them. You know what I'm saying? So when you look at this from your work, what does moving forward actually look like? Not perfect, and not, like, we're not here to fix, but real life. Like, what does that look like?
Well, I mean, for this instance, I would definitely figure out, like, because we've talked about this already about masking and those coping skills that you've learned. Obviously, when perimenopause kicks in, or menopause, those baselines change. So figuring out where you're still masking, or where you're having those problems with coping, and really getting to the root cause of why you were masking in the first place, and not looking at it. I mean, we're putting all the stuff we just talked about to the side, because I'm talking about more than beyond just all the things we just said. But really need to learn. Again, I'm gonna bring up the self-awareness, and know what's going on in your body, what's going on in your emotional state, like what are your triggers, and really going, because this is what worked for me, because I never did find a doctor that was able to help me through all of the things that I've been going through. And I took myself off my medication. I weaned myself off. Once I started doing energy work, all of my symptoms started going away.
Mm-hmm.
When I started getting to that root cause, that energy, I learned how to flow energy. I started working on my wounds and my triggers and things like that. All of my chronic back pain went away. My depressive symptoms went. I mean, I still need the sun, I'll be real, but I
Right,
spent
right.
more time out in the sun purposefully, because I know that that's a thing. And I still do take my vitamin D pills, but still, the other medications I got myself off of, because even my ADHD medication, I'm finally off of it completely. But I went from 30 milligrams a day of Adderall down to half of that, down to a quarter of that. And now I'm finally, like, every once in a while I'll take it if I'm having a really bad day. But like, I've been able to take care of all of those symptoms, even though the gut stuff, the body stuff, like, yes, still go see your doctor, still figure out, because there's so many, symptoms that make us whole that we've talked about, mind, body, spirit. But also look at those other things. Look at the spirit, look at the energetics, look at the
Yep.
emotional aspects of it. So if you keep a journal, or really, like, do the shadow work, or all the things that we've, haven't really did a deep dive into in this series, but both of us do it, on a day-to-day
We
basis.
can do that in another series.
We can do the other side of that. But really knowing the rest of your body, not just your physical body, but everything else, the mental, the emotional, the spiritual, the energetic, whatever the case may be for you, wherever you're at in your journey. I'm not forcing energy on people, but explore other options, and look at the root cause of the things, and figure out what else you can do in the meantime, while you're finding a very good doctor who will advocate.
Absolutely. I think that's what COVID did for a lot of people. I think that the um a lot of people started opening up to a more natural, more holistic way of doing things, because they were tired of getting lied to, gaslit, all the things. I think COVID was a really solid point where people are like, okay, well, I am out of other options, so I'm gonna try this. And now this is why energy work and all the things are now starting to be more talked about. Again, that's another conversation, but just my thoughts on that.
Yeah.
As we close this episode, I want to acknowledge something, that this entire series has been about patterns many women have quietly lived inside of for years, not because they didn't try to understand themselves, but because they were often moving through systems that didn't fully recognize the complexity of what they were experiencing. And I think if there's one thing I hope people take from all this, it's not fear, it's not frustration, it's clarity. Clarity that what you've been noticing in your body matters. that needing deeper answers doesn't make you difficult, and that being dismissed doesn't mean you're wrong. It just means that the system hasn't always kept up with the fullness of women's experiences. Heather, I want to thank you. I want to thank Dr. Scott as well, but he's not here tonight. But thank you for being here for this final conversation and for helping hold that complexity of all of this in this honest and very honest conversation and care with me. So, and to everyone else listening, thank you for moving through this series with us. It's been a very it's even been a learning experience for us too, especially with Dr. Scott in here. So it's been very exciting and interesting to move through all of this, and I'm glad that we finally did it. So wherever you are in your own understanding of your body, I hope this has helped you in some way feel a little more seen, a little more informed, and a little less alone. So until we put another series on, we'll see you next time.
Yeah.